The US model of immigration seems to attract most of the elites of many countries, including our top rankers, India, let's say in the JEE. Yeah. How should we counter this, since this seems to give the US a permanent advantage? If we open ourselves to this sort of immigration, we would encounter demographic change the US seems to be encountering in its territory over the past 70 years. What's the solution? And is such an immigration model sustainable? In the US, will all immigrants assimilate? Interesting question. I kind of touched upon this in the previous question, but what's assimilation, first of all? Assimilation means you give up your culture. Essentially, assimilation means you give up your culture and you adopt the culture of your adopted nation. So, if an Indian immigrant goes to, let's say, France, what does it mean? What does it mean for this person to assimilate? Let's say an Indian family moves to France. What does it mean to say that this family has assimilated into French society? It means they speak French, hopefully French at home. Uh, they practice French culture. They support the French football team, and so on and so forth. You become fully French. You give up your culture and you adopt your adopted country's culture. That is assimilation. Uh, Now you don't need to completely assimilate in multicultural pluralistic nations like the EU nations, in the Western nations. It's okay to practice your own religion, to speak your own language, but you should also at the same time speak the local language as well, hopefully, as the natives. And you should work towards acquiring that sort of fluency in the language. So there are certain things you can do to assimilate, and certain things you don't really need to do. In the US, do all immigrants assimilate? Not all assimilate, but definitely second generation immigrants assimilate, which means the descendants of the actual people who came into the country from another country. Their children definitely are much more assimilated than the parents. So that's how it goes. So now the US model of immigration is a model of brain drain. You suck out the best talent from all countries, especially large nations like India and China. Attract the best talent. Now, when it comes to China, the Chinese have a very clear policy that they are okay with Chinese students going and studying in the US, but they have made China increasingly attractive for not just Chinese, but for the rest of the world. And that's why most Chinese students, they eventually go back to China. Or let's say they found companies in the US and they create startups or companies or whatever, but their allegiance to China doesn't go away. The Chinese typically have ways and means of staying in contact with Chinese citizens who settle abroad. So very few of these become US citizens. In the past, lots of them did become US citizens, but now the trend seems to be on a downward curve of Chinese students becoming US citizens, acquiring US citizenship. And even if they acquire US citizenships, they don't quite lose their ties with China and allegiance to China. The US is very, very aware of this phenomenon. When it comes to India, there's no such thing. The moment you're out of India, you want to become a citizen of that other country because there's nothing waiting for you back in India. That's historically been the situation. And even now, India is not, in my opinion, doing enough to make coming back to India an attractive enough option for Indian students who go abroad. Long way to go for that. So the US takes advantage of this. There's this nation with tremendously gifted people, brilliant students. The cream of the population is brilliant. I'm not saying the whole population is geniuses, but India produces per capita more geniuses than other countries, other civilizations, other cultures. So the US taps into that. The US is very attractive, and that's why they're able to drain India. Um, and obviously, it gives a permanent advantage to the US, right? To the US. So what's the solution? The solution is to make India a top class country. Right now, we are classified as a third world country, not unjustly. There are other terms used for countries like India. I'll not go into that. But we need to raise our standards as a nation. There are countries that are poorer than India with lower per capita GDPs that have better standards of living. It has a lot to do with the corruption that is rampant allegedly in India, right? So the government, what India needs to do is is that the government, central government, whoever needs to launch a war on corruption. But that would mean that is problematic for politicians because of the nature of politics in India. Launching a war on corruption is problematic for any, even the tallest leaders, because of the ground realities of politics in India. But it has to be done. So, if you address the issue of corruption, India will become a much better country to live in. The all the infrastructure issues will quickly get resolved or become go into the process of being resolved. Um, and the quality of life, standards of living will significantly improve, increase. Then we need to make India a meritocratic country. No more reservations, or if you want to give reservations only to those who are financially and economically vulnerable. And reservations mean, what kind of reservations should be given? Free education, not free jobs, not preference in jobs. Once you get your free education, then you need to be in the job market just like everybody else without any special preference. So that needs to happen, but that is nowhere near happening in India. And that's why people who are from the general category, they want to leave India. Students, children, kids, youngsters, why would they stay in a country where somebody who gets way less marks than you will be given a job but you won't get it? Why would you live there? They will rightfully feel that the country doesn't care about them, so they leave. So these issues need to be addressed. The education system needs to be reformed. The ease of doing business needs to be reformed. India needs to become a manufacturing hub, a big, much larger economic power. And if you do these things, then there'll automatically be more job creation. There'll be a huge demand for talent. India needs to become an R&D intensive nation. Then you will attract the best R&D talent, the best researchers, the best engineers. All of these things need to happen. We are far away from that happening. And so that's what I can say. That's what needs to happen. Is it happening? Not quite right now.